This is absolutely ludicrous. You're making a mockery of this court.
Order!
Counsel, you will restrain yourself.
The courtroom that was never meant to be equaled a room is quiet in the way storms are quiet before they tear the sky apart. Fluorescent lights hum, benches creak, and in the center of it all stands a tired black single mother, fingers wrapped around papers she barely understands, but refuses to drop. She isn't dramatic, she isn't loud. She is simply present, carrying the weight of rent notices, double shifts, missed sleep, and a love for a child that refuses to kneel to anyone. Across from her, the prosecutor smiles the kind of smile that people in power perfect over years of never being challenged. He leans back. He studies her like a puzzle he already solved. To him, this isn't a mother. It's an inconvenience, an easy victory, a moment to remind everyone who controls the room. He taps his pen. He whispers something to a colleague. A soft laugh follows. The courtroom watches politely, like this is simply how things go. This place was never designed with her in mind. It was built to intimidate people like her into silence. And yet she stands, shoulders squared, heart pounding, refusing to disappear. She has faced landlords who spoke to her like dirt, bosses who scheduled her like she wasn't human, nights when the world told her she was alone. But here she is anyway. The judge barely looks at her. The clock ticks. The prosecutor's confidence spreads across the room like a shadow, mocking without saying a word yet. He is certain this will be easy. He is certain dignity breaks when pressed hard enough. But today, standing under those cold lights, she is not just another case file. She is a question the system has never wanted to answer, because while he prepared to laugh and she prepared to endure, fate was preparing something else entirely. Pride was about to collide with truth. Power was about to meet a woman who refused to bow, and this courtroom, so used to routine cruelty, was about to be forced to listen. Every breath in the room was waiting, every pair of eyes fixed on her in silence. But none of them, not even the judge, had any idea that this courtroom was about to become the stage for a moment no one would ever forget. Mockery, begins the prosecutor, finally opens his mouth. And the sound is not just speech, it is performance. The slow, dripping tone of a man who has never wondered whether the world might tell him no. He smiles as he mispronounces her name, repeats it twice as if it is amusing, then questions whether she even understands why she is here, letting the insult hide behind fake professionalism and paper-thin courtesy. When she tries to answer, he talks over her, louder each time, training the room to believe that his voice is the only one that counts, while hers is something to be tolerated for a moment and then brushed aside. He laughs softly between questions, a private joke with himself, asking whether she finished school, whether she knows how legal documents work, whether someone smarter helped her, all while pretending he is being helpful. The courtroom does what it has always done in moments like this. It watches, it accepts. It lets humiliation dress itself up as routine. And a few faces even carry that uncomfortable smile that says this is ugly, but familiar. Her hands shake, but not from weakness. They shake from holding everything in, from years of being told to stay respectful, stay calm, stay quiet, even while people like him treat her dignity like something disposable. Yet her eyes never fall, because she knows if she breaks now, they will not just call her emotional, they will call her unfit, irresponsible, another stereotype to file away and forget, and she refuses to give them that satisfaction. This is the cruelty of systems that pretend to be neutral while quietly rewarding arrogance. The people with confidence get patience, the people with power get empathy, and the people like her are expected to endure humiliation as part of the process. He thinks he is demonstrating authority, thinks he is winning some invisible debate, thinks this courtroom is his personal stage, unaware that every word he speaks is revealing exactly who he is and what kind of justice he believes in. And while the room sits in uneasy silence, pretending not to choose sides, something begins to shift, a subtle tightening in the air. A sense that arrogance has gone too far and fate is slowly turning its head toward the man who feels untouchable. And every person can feel the change coming in the air already. He thought he was putting on a performance of dominance, but in reality, he was digging the first shovel of his own downfall. The breaking point, the prosecutor pushes harder now, sharpening his smile as if cruelty is a craft he's refined. He suggests she's irresponsible, hints that she's unfit, paints her as a woman who must have done something wrong because people like her don't get here by accident. Every question carries accusation hidden inside it. He smirks, chuckles under his breath, performing for the gallery like humiliation is a courtroom sport. The judge watches without reacting, already bored, already assuming the ending, already convinced this will be another quiet victory for the machine. She stands there absorbing every blow. At first, the embarrassment burns. Her cheeks feel hot, her chest tight, and shame tries to wrap itself around her like a chain. But then something shifts. The embarrassment doesn't vanish. It hardens. It becomes a resolve, that kind forged when someone realizes there is no one else coming to speak for them. Her breathing steadies, her shoulders lift. The room doesn't notice at first, but a new kind of silence begins to grow around her. Not fearful, but focused. When he mocks her again, asking whether she even understands what responsibility means. She doesn't snap, doesn't shout. She simply lifts her head and asks one calm question. The room stops. The prosecutor freezes for half a second, surprised to hear confidence where he expected collapse. Eyes turn toward her. Even the judge shifts, impatient, irritated at this moment. Is taking longer than routine allows, eager to stamp the gavel and move on with his day, eager to treat a life as a time slot. She is still shaking, but her voice is steady, and that steady voice slices through the courtroom louder than any shout could have. Suddenly everyone can feel it. The injustice isn't subtle anymore. It is thick in the air, obvious, undeniable. And the audience inside and outside this story can feel anger tightening in their chest. The instinctive rejection of watching a human being treated like something less than equal. You can sense the prosecutor forcing back frustration as power begins to slip out of his grip. You can feel the judge inching toward a ruling he believes is already decided. But beneath the surface another force was gathering, something larger than ego or procedure. The undeniable truth that human dignity does not disappear just because someone powerful pretends not to see it. The gallery holds its breath, the air trembling with anticipation, as if the walls themselves are waiting to witness whether courage can still bend the shape of rooms like this. Every silent heartbeat feels like a drum calling justice back to life again in this very place today. And just when it looked like the system had swallowed her whole, she reached into her purse, and everything changed. Phone call. She reaches into her purse slowly, not with panic but with the deliberate calm of someone who has decided she will no longer be spoken over. A few papers rustle, a breath catches somewhere in the room, and then the phone appears in her hand. Murmurs ripple through the benches. The prosecutor leans back like this is entertainment. The judge watches with thin irritation. She unlocks the screen with a steady thumb, scrolls once, and presses call. That quiet ringing sound feels louder than any shout, echoing against wood, law, power, and ego for everyone inside this room today. She lifts the phone to her ear, eyes forward. Voice gentle when the line connects. She does not sound desperate. She sounds precise, respectful, and unshakably clear. She states her name, the courtroom, the judge, the case number she memorized because survival teaches organization. The prosecutor smirks wider, whispering to someone beside him, enjoying what he thinks is desperation disguised as confidence. He jokes under his breath about calling social media for help, about drama queens, about people who never understand the seriousness of law. Bertha Clerk hears the name she speaks next, and their posture changes immediately inside. The judge notices. A subtle stiffness replaces boredom. He tries not to react, tries not to reveal curiosity, but his chin lifts just enough to betray concern. The gallery senses something different too, a tremor in authority. She keeps talking softly, like a woman refusing to apologize for existing. On the other end of the call, someone important is clearly listening. The courtroom is suddenly very aware that this moment is being witnessed beyond these walls. The prosecutor's smirk wavers, just slightly, like a mask slipping at the edges, not yet gone, but cracking in front of every silent watcher. Her voice gains strength without growing louder. She explains how she has been spoken over, questioned like a caricature instead of a citizen, treated as though dignity is optional. She does not beg. She documents. She does not plead. She testifies. The clerk leans closer to the bench, quietly, relaying what they understand now. This is not a casual phone call. This is oversight. Law meeting law. Power speaking directly to power. The judge's pen stills. The prosecutor swallows and tries to laugh again, but it lands wrong, thin and nervous, because suddenly control no longer belongs to him anymore. The room breathes in as one. Even the walls feel awake, listening to the gravity of this conversation unfolding. She finishes speaking with the same calm courage she began with and listens as the voice on the other end responds firmly, decisively, undeniably. No shouting, no theatrics, just authority recognizing injustice. The clerk straightens now. The judge stares forward, jaw tight. The prosecutor's confidence breaks, his smile gone, leaving the realization that arrogance has consequences, and witnesses. Every eye in the courtroom is locked on her, waiting, because something has begun. And within seconds, everything in the courtroom stopped moving. The judge freezes. The clerk approaches the bench like someone carrying thunder in their hands, a quiet urgency wrapped in formality. A folded note is placed before the judge. He reads the first line casually, then the second, and suddenly his face changes, color drains. Confidence stiffens into fear. The courtroom doesn't know what the paper says, but everyone can feel what it means. This is no longer routine. This is no longer a predictable script. The prosecutor watches with a confused half-smile, waiting for the moment to continue his performance, waiting to resume his control. But that moment never comes. The judge clears his throat once, then again, because the words he has to speak are heavier than he expected. He looks at the prosecutor, not with partnership, not with shared authority, but with scrutiny. He asks him to approach. The room tilts. The prosecutor hesitates, then raises like gravity is doubled, his arrogance finally meeting weight for the first time. The gallery shifts forward in their seats. The energy has changed. That predator is suddenly uncertain. Quiet words pass between the bench and the man who believed he owned this space. The judge mentions conduct, he mentions tone. He mentions that someone higher, someone watching, someone with power he cannot ignore now, is aware of what has been happening here today. The prosecutor tries to joke, tries to shrug it away, but nobody is laughing now. Least of all the judge, whose expression has hardened into something unmistakable: accountability. The judge asks questions, the kind that sting because they reveal intention. Why the mockery? Why the interruptions? Why the humiliation disguised as procedure? Each question is another mirror held up to his ego. Each answer sounds smaller than the last. The room breathes differently, like oxygen has returned after being rationed, and in the middle of it all stands the woman who was supposed to be broken by this system. She does not gloat. She does not smirk. She simply stands with a kind of quiet strength that doesn't need applause to be undeniable. She is not winning. She is finally being seen. Justice doesn't feel loud in this moment. It feels like air coming back to lungs, like lights turning on in a room long kept dim. The prosecutor's posture collapses inch by inch, his certainty dissolving as he realizes his power was never invincible. The judge's voice grows steadier, firmer, more determined to restore what arrogance tried to steal. And for the first time today, the courtroom feels honest, because what came next wasn't just justice. It was accountability on display. It was a message to every quiet witness who had ever watched power abuse at stage, a signal that even the untouchable can be questioned, that arrogance can be summoned to answer for itself. The silence in the room was no longer fear. It was awakening, a collective realization that this story had flipped and it was nowhere near finished yet. AIs deadlocked forward, hearts racing, as everyone waited to see just how far this sudden wave of truth would reach that day. The collapse of arrogance. The prosecutor's mouth tries to form confidence again, but whatever swagger he once owned is gone. Rumors move through the courtroom like wind through tall grass. Internal review, formal complaint, oversight watching. Suddenly the man who mocked someone for standing alone finds himself the one exposed, not powerful, not untouchable, just another official forced to answer for the harm his arrogance caused. His smirk disappears entirely. His shoulders fall in small, embarrassing inches. He nods when spoken to now. He chooses his words with trembling care. The judge's voice no longer protects him. It measures him. The same tone he once used to shrink others now closes in around him, and he can feel it. The judge pauses the case. He announces that conduct matters, that dignity is not decoration, that the courtroom is not a theater for belittling human beings. He orders review, requests documentation, makes clear that this day will not vanish as another forgotten page in a dusty file. What began as a show of ego is now an investigation that will follow him wherever he goes. The gallery can feel it. Something sacred is returning. But this story stretches far beyond one room. This is not the first courtroom where someone with power tried to humiliate someone without it. This is not the first mother who walked in alone, already expected to lose. Across countries, across cities, across languages, arrogance wears different suits but always carries the same sneer. And everywhere, people hold their breath hoping for a moment like this. A moment where the script breaks, where the bully realizes the world is bigger than his ego. The mother stands quietly while this unfolds. She does not cheer. She does not gloat. She simply breathes, finally allowed to exist as a person in a place that tried to reduce her to a problem. The judge looks at her differently now. Still professional, still firm, but respectful. Huani acknowledges her courage, without saying the word, because even he knows everyone can feel it. She stayed standing. She held the line. She refused to disappear when disappearing would have been easier, and as the prosecutor steps back, smaller than when he walked in, truth finally outweighs ego. Humility replaces cruelty. Justice feels less like a speech and more like gravity restoring balance. Yet the moment isn't loud. It is steady. It lingers in the air, settling into every person watching, telling them that change is possible, that power can bend, that dignity can fight back and win. People will leave this courtroom changed, even the ones who pretend they saw nothing special. They will remember the silence, the sudden respect, the way arrogance shrank when faced with truth. They will carry it into conversations, into families, into systems that desperately need reminders that humanity matters. For the mother, it means breathing without fear for the first time in a long time. Knowing her voice didn't just survive, it mattered. And for everyone watching, hope finally felt practical, not imaginary anymore. But the most powerful moment wasn't what was said in court. It was what happened after. The story didn't end in that courtroom. It started living in the quiet, places people rarely talk about. It moved first through whispers, always offices, courthouse elevators where eyes met, and people admitted what they had seen. Clerks spoke softly about the moment arrogance cracked. Junior lawyers replayed it, like a lesson they'd needed for years. Even the judge's staff carried it with them, not as gossip, but as a reminder. Power is only powerful until someone stands up to it. The prosecutor's name didn't need to trend. His reputation shifted in the way that hurts more than scandal through hesitation. Through the subtle distance people create when they realize the bravado they admired was just cruelty wearing a suit. Some stories allowed headlines. This one spread like a pulse. Community advocates heard. A civil rights group quietly posted about it. Court observers shared details anonymously. And in the comments began parents who had stood alone against polished authority. Women who had learned to brace themselves for disrespect before they even opened their mouths. People who had grown tired of systems that forget the humanity inside their rules. They didn't cheer for humiliation. They cheered for dignity. They wrote things like, "That could have been my mother. I wish someone had spoken to me like that judge spoke to her." Finally, someone remembered that justice should feel human. Inside other courtrooms, something subtle shifted. A prosecutor paused before sneering. A judge listened a little longer. A clerk smiled at someone who looked terrified. No policies changed. No law was rewritten. But people changed. And people create systems. Meanwhile, somewhere far away from the marble floors and polished shoes, a single mother went home and finally exhaled. She didn't feel like she won. She didn't feel powerful. She simply felt seen. She placed her phone on the table, glanced at her child, and realized something quietly monumental. She didn't just defend herself, she reminded everyone in that room what respect looked like. Neighbors would never know why she seemed taller the next day. Her child wouldn't fully understand why their mother hugged them longer. What something in her life, something in our collective understanding shifted. Because sometimes the biggest revolutions don't scream, they rippled on. Those ripples travel into policies, into attitudes, into the next moment a person in power decides who they are going to be. Cliffhanger tease. Because this story wasn't just about one mother. It became about all of us. The moral echo justice isn't always a gavel striking wood. It doesn't always roar in headlines or flood screens with images of confrontation. Sometimes, it sits quietly in a courtroom, in a breath held too long, in the small act of refusing to be invisible. Heroes are not always warriors in armor. Sometimes, they are mothers who have carried the weight of the world in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. Exhausted yet unbroken, their hearts steady. Even when the system tries to fracture them. In that room, she did not raise her voice. She did not demand attention. She simply existed with courage and patience, reminding everyone present, everyone listening beyond these walls that dignity is not a privilege granted by power. It is a right, inherent, immutable, and unyielding. Every smirk she faced, every laugh she endured, every assumption of inferiority thrown her way was met not with revenge, but with the quiet insistence that truth cannot be silenced. That insistence became a lesson, not just for the prosecutor or the judge, but for the entire room, for clerks, for bystanders, for the community outside those doors, and for anyone who has ever felt small in the eyes of authority. This story echoes because it is a reminder of something that transcends the walls of one courtroom. It is a testament to accountability, to the principle that power must answer for its arrogance, and that ordinary people, ordinary acts, can bend systems in ways they never expected. It is a call to recognize the strength carried quietly in those who appear powerless. The single mother, the overlooked clerk, the neighbor who chooses to speak up, the citizen who refuses to look away. Every step she took, every calm word she spoke, reverberates beyond that day. It reminds us that equality under the law is not just written on paper. It is enforced in moments of courage, in acts of integrity, and in the willingness of one individual to refuse to bow. And as the room empties, as the echo of that courtroom settles into memory, one truth remains. Real power is measured not in intimidation, not in mockery, but in the strength to stand and insist upon justice for all. In a world where power often laughs at the weak, sometimes all it takes is one voice, one moment, and one brave soul refusing to bow, to remind everyone what justice truly looks like.